Here we are, continuing our discussion. You see Eric's been playing with more trains. He's got a Shay in front of us now by his special request. Yeah, look at that smile.
That locomotive was built by a man named Ephraim Shay. Ephraim, that's the name of the northern kingdom of Israel, that second-born son of Joseph that we were talking about earlier. And there's some really interesting things about that happen to fit right into the study. Wait a minute, you got to keep that thing in view. They're not being able to appreciate it. Are you?
Just keep talking, Eric.
Gosh.
We saw the train.
The interesting thing about that train is they put it on a narrow gauge so that it can actually go up a steeper incline and tighter curves. And they put a gear drive, almost like a granny gear in an old truck, so that the engine can go and it'll just keep pulling, even under much heavier loads, much more difficult passages than what the bigger train would do. That was an incredible invention that changed everything. Boy, if Fred was here, he could really do it up justice, but you won't even show the picture of it. Gosh.
I showed the picture. Now
Show
get
him
busy.
again. Let him see the Shay. Gosh, man.
Look at that Shay. See, it's got the side pistons over here. And what's that? Toothpicks. Wow. Okay, Eric.
All right. Just wanted to carry along again in Hosea. We talked about Hosea 5. Let us know, let us strive to know Yahweh, like the dawn whose emergence is certain. See, there's all these words, so many places that talk about this hope of recovery. And again, I've lived my whole life under the shadow of doom. The Ruskies were going to nuke Los Angeles. That's where I was born and raised. Hasn't happened. 65 years later, hasn't happened. Thank you, Yahweh. I'm sure the Ruskies appreciate that too, because we were threatening to do it to them. And I don't say Ruskies as a derision, it's a term of endearment. I'm just saying that, what's all this about? Yahweh keeps telling us that He's going to make things better if we would just turn back to His Word. Hundreds of passages. He promises to turn things around for us. I was told that I'm a darn fool. I'm a complete blithering idiot if I think there's any chance of this world recovering from the state of affairs it's in right now. But I'm just quoting Scripture. I'm reading the Scripture, hearing what it says, and reiterating it. So here, look at verse 6 of Hosea 6. I desire kindness, not sacrifice, and the knowledge of Elohim more than burnt offerings. But they, speaking of Israel, like Adam, speaking of all mankind, even way back the first man, transgressed the covenant. There they betrayed me. Yahweh Himself feels personal betrayal by us when we do not regard His words, to understand what He's declared to us about Himself, and when we don't do kindness to one another. This word kindness is chesed. He'd rather have us do kindness to each other than to perform all these sacrifices of burnt offerings, killing 10,000 bulls. What was it that Solomon did on the day he inaugurated the temple? Was that really what was mandated, what was necessary? I mean, if they just had a giant barbecue, that's one thing. But was he just burning these hundreds and hundreds of animals as a burnt offering? Burnt offering is that which completely burned up, incinerated down to crisp, that nobody could eat, from my understanding. Now, you had some fellow comment on your page just a few minutes ago.
Page, it was a forum.
We do read these things. I try to read all the comments I can, which isn't very many. I'm not even aware of most of the comments.
No, this was on a separate internet forum. It had nothing to do with my Facebook page or anything like that. But I was debating about Sabbath. And one of the guys said, well, if you're going to go back to Sabbath, you might as well just get out the goats and the sheep and just start sacrificing again. People
in your
hate
backyard.
it that much.
So this guy was saying, if you're going to keep the Sabbath day,
And I showed it to Eric. He saw it too. So
if we're going to suggest that anyone ought to keep the Sabbath day, meaning sit down, don't work on the Sabbath day, well, then you might as well go grab herds of sheep and cattle and slaughter them in your backyard.
can you believe it?
Yeah, I can believe it. He's reiterating, as a good student, what he's been taught by his teachers, by his pastors, professors, theologians. See, everybody determines, makes up, analyzes, and establishes doctrines of interpretation of understanding. Whoever this fellow was, he's just saying, okay, this is the way he understands it. To you, who looks a little bit more into things, it seems what he's saying is crazy. He thinks what you're saying is crazy. And here it is. We're just trying to present the words as they appear. And the reason why we're going through and laboring over Hosea and Deuteronomy and Isaiah and Ezekiel and Zechariah is because I know a number of people who have never in their life come across these words, never read the Old Testament of the Bible. I've seen some friends who have Bibles that don't even have an Old Testament. And then the people in Nigeria that were just given the New Testament, and Wycliffe translators haven't yet had the occasion to translate any of these words in the Old Testament. And then some people say, why should they? They're nailed to the cross and done away with. Really? Nailed to the cross and done away with? Let's look at Jeremiah 7 for a minute. And this is in Stern's complete Jewish Bible. There's no Hebrew words written in here. It's all English. Just another translation. Here.
722.
Yeah. Here, let me just back up. This is... Some people have never heard these words. 722 is the verse we're going to look at, and then I started looking ahead a couple verses, and it's like, gosh, you know, the whole chapter. Let me just read this particular version. This word came to Jeremiah from Yahweh. Stand at the gate of Yahweh and proclaim this word. So here, Yahweh, our Elohim himself, is saying to Jeremiah, you go stand at the gate and proclaim this to my people. Make sure they hear it. This is before the destruction came to Judah and Jerusalem. Listen to the word of Yahweh, all of you from Yehudah who enter these gates to worship Yahweh. You might as well go stand at the front door of the church because people go there to worship Yahweh. Are they worshiping accurately the way he requested? That's a question. That's not a comment. Verse 3, here is what Yahweh Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, says. You better give me more sheep and goats to sacrifice. No, he said, improve your ways and actions, and I will let you stay in this place. It's a matter of chesed, kindness to one another. Do not rely on the deceitful slogan that says, the temple of God, the temple of the Lord. These buildings are the temple of... This says Adonai. Don't think... We talked about that back in Isaiah 29. Ariel, this is the city that David dwelt. We'll never lose this. And it was sunk to the bottom of the sea, as it were. No, but if you really improve your ways and actions, if you truly, really administer justice between your people, if you stop oppressing foreigners, orphans, and widows, that's taking advantage of the poor. I mean, he's given us a list of what we need to do in order to stay in his favor. If you stop shedding innocent blood in this place, what's that, human trafficking and cannibalizing infants and abortions? And if you stop following other gods, that's Elohim Achrim, to your own harm. See, everything that people do, this whole list, thinking that they're getting ahead, they're actually diminishing their own life, presently and for eternity. Then I will let you stay in this place, in the land that I gave to your ancestors forever and ever. Look, you are relying on deceitful words that cannot do you any good. First you steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, offer to Baal, that word Baal is translated Lord and Master, and go after Elohim Achrim, that's other gods, foreign or next, coming in the future, strange, other than what he had said. Oh, that is what Elohim Achrim means, that you have not known, or that he did not make known to them. That Yahweh, it's different than the Yahweh. So any deity that's different than the explanation of what these words are, where Yahweh identifies his own self by these words and letters, anything different is an Elohim Achrim. Then you come and stand before me in this house that bears my name and say, we are saved. I've heard that said from a lot of churches. We're saved. We're coming to the house of worship. And yes, how much even in America has good churchmen done all these things he just listed, besides the rest of the world, so that you can go on doing these abominations? You know, I had a friend, I mentioned this before, he did some work for a guy, and then the guy was an assistant pastor of a church, and the guy said, I'm not going to pay you. And my friend said, hey, doesn't your own Bible, your own church, say that you should pay your workmen? He says, I'll ask for forgiveness. I'm not going to pay you. Justice, balanced scales, is you pay the people that work for you. And the guy said, hey, I'm a believer. I'm going to ask to be saved, and I'm good. You're out of here. It's like, boy, that's injustice. It's coming back on his own head. Do you regard, verse 11, do you regard this house which bears my name as a cave for bandits? I can see for myself what's going on. That's Yahweh speaking. Says Yahweh, go to the place in Shiloh. That's up there in northern Israel, the place where the Mishkan used to stand, that used to be mine, that used to bear my name, and see what I did to it. Because of the wickedness of my people Israel, I spoke to you again and again. That's the word Ayin Vav Dalet, repeatedly and forcefully, the same message, but you would not listen. I called you, but you would not answer. Now, says Yahweh, because you have done all these things, I will do to the house that bears my name, on which you rely, and to the place I gave you and to your ancestors, what I did to Shiloh, and I will drive you out from my presence, just as I drove out all your kinsmen, all the descendants of Ephraim. Again, the Ephraim Shea train. Just playing off the words, just so you remember it. Verse 16, so you, Jeremiah, do not pray for this people. Don't even cry. Pray or intercede on their behalf with me, because I will not listen to you. Here's a case where Yahweh does not listen to not only our prayers, but the prayers of Jeremiah. He said, look, these people have done themselves in. Do not bother wasting your words. I'm not going to listen. They won't listen. When we do not listen to him, he will not and cannot listen to our prayers. That's what he says more than once. 17. Don't you see what they are doing in these cities of Yehuda and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather the wood, the fathers light the fire, the women knead the dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven. Hot cross buns, that's where that came from.
Happy Easter.
That's what it is, just to provoke me. They pour out drink offerings to other gods. That's Elohim Achrim. Are they really provoking me? Do you think that it really gets in his nose and his face? Or are they provoking themselves to their own ruin? Therefore, here is what Yahweh Elohim says, my anger and my fury will be poured out on this place. We pour out drink offerings of libations in sacrifice and reverence to Elohim Achrim, other gods, other protocols of worship that he did not tell us to do. Then what gets reciprocated back is he's pouring out his wrath on us. And it might look something like the coronavirus, or the Vietnam War, or the Great Depression. I mean, it might look something like that. My anger and fury will be poured out on this place. Remember, this is Israel, this is Jerusalem. On men, animals, trees in the fields, and produce growing from the ground, and it will burn without being quenched. The whole world reels in agony and suffers when Israel acts stupid, is what's going on. Verse 21, thus says Yahweh Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, you may as well eat the meat of your burnt offerings along with that of your sacrifices. He's saying, I'm rejecting your sacrifices. That's not what it's about. Go ahead and make your own dinner with it. For I did not speak to your ancestors or give them orders. There's no commandment concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. Rather, verse 23, what I did order them was this: pay attention to what I say. Listen, Shema Israel. Then I will be your Elohim and you will be my people. In everything, live according to the way that I order you, so that things will go well for you. But they neither listened nor paid attention, but lived according to their own plans in the stubbornness of their evil hearts, thus going backward and not forward. You have done this from the day your ancestors came out of Egypt, that was Passover, until today. Didn't they come out in Exodus 13? Isn't that where it talks about them getting right out? So we just read that at the Pesach meal. Just so people know, Exodus 13 is where it talks about the Exodus. And Yahweh is saying, here's Jeremiah. This is 1,000 years later from the Exodus. And he says, for 1,000 years, that includes the time of David and Solomon and Joshua. You guys have done this since the day you got out. And here it is, another 2,500 years or so since then. We can't say we've done any better because the church has been preaching for 2,000 years. We don't have to listen or pay attention to anything he said. All this stuff has been nailed to the cross and done away with. Hence the reply that you got on the internet site. So this is still active even today. So here Yahweh says, hey, I wanted to be your Elohim and you be my people. And he still is yet, 2020 now, he is still as yet never got as he Chafatz has desired. Even though I sent you all my servants the prophets, sending them time after time, they would not listen or pay attention to me, but stiffened their necks. They did worse than their ancestors. So tell them all this, but they won't listen to you. Likewise call to them, but they won't answer you. Therefore say to them, verse 28, this is the nation that has not listened to the voice of Yahweh their Elohim. They will not take correction. Faithfulness has perished. It has vanished from their mouths. On to say that Yahweh has rejected, abandoned the generation that rouses his anger. What I'm saying, not to go on about Jeremiah 7 so much, but the point is there any credibility to any of this stuff? So I'm going to read a couple other things in Hosea and rather quickly, hopefully, get to the end of Hosea, which is chapter 14. The interesting thing is, Jeremiah here was talking to the southern kingdom in particular. This was right before the siege of Jerusalem. In fact, the book of Lamentations is Isaiah going on with this wail of getting this vision of what was going to happen and the horrors of the devastation, the carnage, the pillaging that came in when Yahuwah sent in Babylon. But Hosea was written for the northern kingdom, the lost 10 tribes. And so this is the northern kingdom that Hosea has written, the southern kingdom that Jeremiah has written about. So we're just going to hit a couple verses here. Hosea, just to skip through. Hosea 7:7. They have all become heated like an oven. They have devoured their judges. All their kings have fallen. Yet no one among them calls out to me. Verse 2, they do not say in their heart that I remember all their evils. Now their deeds have surrounded them. Their deeds have surrounded them. Everything that comes upon us is our own way brought back on our own heads. That's just another place where he mentions it. The key verse here is verse 13. And then we'll read on 8 through 16. In fact, let me just back up. Let's go to Hosea chapter 7, verse 8. Ephraim will be intermingled with the nations. Ephraim was like a cake that was not turned over. Strangers have consumed his strength, but he didn't know. Well, I don't know. Kind of like, I don't know what's going on. Ephraim is just corroding like the rust, like the moth. Also, Old age was cast upon him. That's to say, becoming weak and frail, but he didn't know. He's just not paying attention. The glory of Israel was humbled before him. But he didn't turn back to Yahweh their Elohim, nor did they seek him despite all this. Ephraim was like a foolish dove with no understanding. They called to Egypt. They gone to Assyria. Assyria was to the northeast, Egypt to the southwest. And every time Ephraim got in trouble, they'd turn to the neighbors instead of turning to Yahweh. When they go, I will spread my net over them. I will bring them down like the birds of the sky. I will afflict them as has been heard by their congregation. Here's verse 13. Woe to them, for they have moved away from me. Plunder upon them, for they have rebelled against me. I would redeem them, but they have spoken lies about me. This is Yahweh speaking. Our heritage, our ancestry has done this repeatedly now for 3,000 years, 4,000 years. We don't seem to know him. We speak lies about him. We invent doctrines. We worship other him and go, what's going on? And Yahweh says, turn back to me. How do we turn back to him? How is it we turn back to him? Turn back to the Ivrit, the meanings of the letters of every word written in his language. Yes, I'm reading English, but it's not about the English. It's just I'm trying to communicate. They did not cry out to me in their hearts when they wailed on their beds. How many people in the midst of this crisis are wailing on their beds, crying out, oh Lord God, please deliver us, please help us, please save us? Are we turning back to his words? The reason for these videos is to provide the occasion to listen to what he said about times just like this. Verse 15, as for me, Yahweh speaking, I afflicted, strengthened their arms, but they think evil of me. What? Of course we think evil of him. If he's claiming responsibility for the affliction, what's the point of that? It was to get us to turn back to him. They turn, but not to the one above. They are like a deceptive bow. Their officers will fall by the sword because of the fury of their tongues. This was their derision in the land of Egypt. And the footnote here says, even the Egyptians, their enemies, their previous taskmasters, said these guys are just idiots. At least the other cultures know that if they do something wrong, if evil befalls them, they better turn to their God. They better turn to where they get their power and appease him. But Israel's too much of a bunch of idiots to do that. And that includes all of us. Chapter 8, verses 1 to 4. Put to your pallet, put a shofar. The enemy swoops in like an eagle. Picture themselves as a dove and an eagle coming into upon the temple of Yahweh, because they have violated my covenant and they have rebelled against my Torah. That's the answer right there. Because we have violated the covenant and rebelled against the Torah, the instructions of righteousness. That's the reason why this stuff happens. That's what he says. Hosea chapter 8. To me, Israel should cry out, my Elohim, we acknowledge you. That's what we're supposed to cry out. So why are we making these videos? Why are we talking about this language? Because that's the script. That's what we're supposed to be saying. Israel has forsaken the benevolent one, so the enemy will pursue him. This is cause and effect. He's laying it out right here in front of us. They enthroned kings, but not for me. They ordained officers. They set up all these powerful wise men and professors and pastors and teachers and army officers. And Yahweh says, but I don't know. That's kind of saying back at them what they kept saying. Every time he called out, they go, I don't know. So then when Israel sets up their powerful stuff, Yahweh says, I don't know. I don't see. It's the reciprocation again. Verse 12, chapter 8. I wrote for them the great principles of my Torah, but they were regarded as something alien. The sacrifices for my burnt offerings, let them slaughter for meat and let them eat. Yahweh does not desire them. Now he will remember their iniquity and punish their sins. There's no sacrifice when we do it on purpose. And they will return to Egypt. Now that word Egypt is Mitzrayim, and that's Mem, Zadi, Resh, Yod, Mem. And the word Zadi, Resh, remember, is confines, between a rock and a hard place. Hard squeezed and pressed in, where we get the word Caesar, Kaiser, and czar. Says, okay, you liked it better when you were under that kind of oppression of slavery? You're going back. Israel has forgotten its maker. He has built temples. Judah has proliferated fortified cities. Yahweh speaking, I will send a fire into his cities and I will consume its palaces. So when we get gentle Jesus, meek and mild, people say, oh, that Jesus and Yahweh, that's the same guy. The Old Testament God and the New Testament God, same person. Is this gentle Jesus, meek and mild, speaking to us? Is it? Chapter 9, verse 1. Rejoice not, Israel, like the exultation of the peoples, for you have strayed from your Elohim. Okay, there's the predicament. Just so you know, I mentioned in the last video something about it's actually in Hosea 10, verse 11. Ephraim is a trained calf who loves to thresh. And I passed over the goodliness of her neck. I joined Ephraim to plow with Yehudah, that Jacob should harrow. Verse 12, I said, sow for yourselves righteousness, and you will reap according to kindness. Till for yourselves a tilling, and a time to seek Yahweh until he comes and teaches you righteousness. But you have plowed wickedness, and you have reaped iniquity, and eaten the fruit of denial, for you relied on your evil way, on your many mighty men. There's again the problem. He's telling us, he says, listen, this is the way it works. It's an agricultural scenario. Yahweh said, Ephraim and Yehudah are my two. One place he calls them sons, and another place he calls them wives. Like he's married to them. In Jeremiah chapter 3, he talks about divorcing them. But Yahweh says, you two are my bow and arrow. You are my two oxen that I have yoked together. Ephraim and Yehudah is Yahuwah's personal heritage. Everything, it's the apple of his eye. His attention is on these two. Lost tribes to the north, the 10 tribes, and the 2 tribes to the south, Yehudah and Benjamin. Neither one can really do without the other. He yoked them together. But there was a civil war between the north and south for hundreds of years. Just like in the United States of America, so there was a civil war between the north and the south. He's telling us the solution to the problem. Plow righteousness. Sow for yourselves righteousness, and you will reap according to kindness. This is the occasion when every one of us can intend and follow through with doing kindness. The interesting thing about this Shea locomotive, it was a different model than the previous one we had sitting here. The previous one was a wider track and it could carry heavier loads, probably go faster, but this one here could navigate curves and up and down the mountains and inclines, and this train here really changed the efficiency of the workload. It's all about how we spend our lives. How do we do what Yahweh said to do? For somebody to say, well, if he told us to sit down in the Sabbath away, we may just butcher a backyard full of cattle and sheep. I could call the guy names, but I don't even know the guy. I could say that that's stupid and foolish, but I don't know him. I don't know that that's stupid and foolish. That's the understanding that we've been taught. All I can say is we've been made ignorant idiots. All of us. And the whole idea of coming back to these words is to correct the mess, to straighten out the problem. And if we were to look outside and say, none of us can go to work, everybody sit down. That's kind of like a forced Shabbat of a sort, like the Shemitah year. Don't work for one whole year. How they did that, that's a whole other matter. Jonathan Kahn, a rabbi, wrote a book regarding that, if you want to look into it a little closer. And Joseph Dumond, Sighted Moon Ministry up in Ontario, Canada, has a lot to say about that. The point is, where's the solution? He told us, do righteousness and kindness. It's not about the animal sacrifices, it's righteousness and kindness. We look here then at Hosea 11. Why did he say this? verse 9, I will not carry out my burning wrath. I will not recant and destroy Ephraim, for I am Elohim and not a man. The Holy One is in your midst and will not enter a city. But yet when Yeshua came, he came as a man and he did enter a city and be in our midst. Is that the same guy? Goes on, verse 10, they will follow after Yahweh like a lion. He will roar, and his children will stir from the west. Is that the Western Hemisphere? Is that us? They will stir like a bird from Egypt. Oh, that's west of Israel. That's Egypt. And like a dove from the land of Assyria, I will settle them in their homes. The word of Yahweh. That's Nam Yahweh. I'm just reading little bits and pieces because I'm saying that even with all this talk about smacking Israel and paying them back for what they're doing, verse 2, I sent to Ephraim who took them upon his arms, and they did not know that I healed them. With the cords of man I drew them, with the bonds of love, and I acted toward them like those who raised the yoke upon their animals' jaws and provided food to them. Yahweh's constantly talking about these almost like these two hands, this powerful yod hand of beating, and then this compassionate, merciful hand of comfort. It's enough to make you schizophrenic, it seems. Here's Ephraim's typical behavior. Chapter 12, verse 2. Verse 1. Ephraim has surrounded me with falsehood, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Yehudah still ruled with God and was faithful with the Holy One. Stones to Knock translation. Verse 2. Ephraim embraces the wind, pursues the east wind. All day long he increases falsehood and plunder. That's lies and stealing. They seal a covenant with Assyria, and oil is transported to Egypt. Again, here's another place. Looking to the two neighbors, which Yahweh told him not to do. Yahweh has a contention with Yehudah to visit upon Jacob according to his evil ways. He will requite him in accordance with his deeds. Two more places right there where he says he returns a man's way on his own head. Here, verse 6, Yahweh is the Elohim of legions. That's the word zavot. Yahweh is his zakar, his remembrance. Quoting from Exodus 3, the word Yahuwah, Yod-He-Vav-He, is his name of remembrance, recollection, commemorative, memory, remembering. It also means masculine. As for you, return by your Elohim. Reading in English, it looks a little different. In Hebrew, observe kindness and justice, and always hope to your Elohim. But you are instead a traitor with scales of deceit in his hand, who loves to cheat. Ephraim said, I have become rich. I have found power for myself. For in all my toil they shall not find for me any iniquity which contains sin. Ephraim figured out a way to slip through the cracks and be devious and do that. Hey, I look real nice. I go to church. I say the Pledge of Allegiance, but yet he's just despicably evil. Lying, killing, and stealing. Gee, sounds like American foreign policy. Gosh, ever since the beginning. Chapter 13. It used to be that when Ephraim spoke, there was trembling. He was exalted in Israel, but he became guilty through Baal. That's Elohim Achrim. That's other deities. That's the identity of his Elohim, his God, the one he looks to for his strength. It was not according to how Yahweh himself revealed himself, his character, and his ways in the Torah. Ephraim invented their own God and became corrupt because he then followed after the ways of his God, which was lying, killing, and stealing. And they say that Ephraim and Manasseh is Great Britain and the United States. It looks pretty similar. Chapter 13, verse 14. From the clutches of the grave I would have ransomed them. I would have redeemed them from death. But now I will be your words of death. Yahweh speaking, I will be the one who decrees the grave upon you, and remorse will be hidden from my eyes. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Then we get into chapter 14, verse 2. And this is, I will read the rest of this to finish up this concept here. And then talk about one part of it. Return, Israel. So here's the solution. Return, Israel. Lost 10 tribes, all the 12 tribes. Do you want to associate with this group? What's that verse in the New Testament there that says that we are grafted in to the stock?
Commonwealth.
The commonwealth?
Yeah.
It's like branches grafted into the commonwealth of
It
Israel.
talks about it in Ephesians 2 and Romans 11.
So in other words, the church is not its own entity over here, and Yahweh just is consuming and burning and trashing the 12 tribes. He took the 12 tribes, and because they went after other deities, he divorced them, ruined them, chopped them up, sent them into the dispersed through the world, known as the diaspora or the dispersion. But then in the New Testament, he's saying that those who believe, those who see Yeshua as being the Mashiach and want to follow him and walk as he walked, which was in the ways of Yahuwah according to the Torah, they were grafted into the stock of Israel, not a different planting, not a whole new church, a whole new religion, a whole new family. It was they are supposed to act just like the Torah. And then Paul goes on to say, if Yahweh didn't spare the natural branches, then don't we think that if we're grafted in, that he'd spare this wild branch that was added? We've got these same words in front of us.
Yeah, it's funny though, Eric. They say, well, no, we're New Testament Christians. Who was that made with? The New Covenant.
Well, again, these are, I'm putting words out there. People can contend with me. People can argue. People can disagree. Go ahead, make up your own religion if you want. Choose to not believe these words if you want. I'm trying to show you on the basis of the meanings of these words and letters that we have inherited lies, quoting from Scripture, saying those words. I'm not accusing anybody. We have inherited lies from our ancestors. Empty things in which there is nothing to gain, nothing to profit. I forget which verse that's from, but that's pretty much an exact quote that they will say in the future. I'm saying it now, making these things present tense. Okay, here. Verse 2, chapter 14 of Hosea. Return, Israel, unto Yahweh your Elohim, for you have stumbled in your iniquity. Take words with you. Take words with you. And say to him. Now this says it in English, but that's not what he said. He said it in Hebrew. So I'm going to, in a moment, read these Hebrew words, Hosea 14, verses 3 and 4. Take words with you and say to him, may you forgive all iniquity and accept good, and let our lips substitute for bulls. And it says here that our speech should take the place of sacrificial burnt offerings. That's one perspective. Assyria will not save us. Assyria was the tremendous war power to the northeast. We will not ride upon horses, and we will no longer say, O our gods, to the work of our hands, for it is with you, speaking of Yahuwah, that an orphan finds mercy. An orphan, a parentless child, finds rachem. That's the word mercy and compassion. Then Yahweh responds saying, this is what's in front of us then, I will rectify their waywardness. I will love them gratuitously, for my anchor has turned away or will turn away, depending on how you translate this word, past tense, future tense. From them I will be to Israel as the dew. D-E-W, that's this moist rain where everything starts flourishing. And he will blossom like a rose bush. That's Shoshana. And his roots, Sheresh, will strike out like, this says, the cedars of Lebanon. Like that tree, the cedar of Lebanon, that we showed in that one video that we opened up with here. His tender branches, that's springtime, Aviv, this month of the beginning of the year, will go forth. And his glory will be like that of the olive tree, and his fragrance like that of Lebanon. Again, remember we talked about that yesterday. That's frankincense. Those who dwell in his shade will return. He's not going to have them return only to kill them right out of the gate. So this speaks of the fact that once we return to these words of Yahuwah, our Elohim, return to the words of this Torah, then he will cause everything to resprout. And there's a distance of time in front of us to be his people and reveling in his abundant grace as he turns everything around. Those who dwell in his shade will return. That same word return is shuv, where we get the root of the word Shabbat, which means also to sit and to dwell. They will revive like grain and blossom like a vine. Their repute, their reputation will be like the wine of Lebanon, famous, of world renown. Everybody will be talking about this. Ephraim will say, what more need have I of idols? In other words, he's also going to say, why did I ever turn to the idols? I will respond, Yahweh speaking, and I will gaze upon him. That's gazing like a parent to a child that he's so happy with, so proud of, so enamored with. And I am like an ever fresh cypress tree. Your fruit will be provided from me. Last verse. Who is wise and will understand these things? Understanding and will know them. The word know there is knowledge. Dalet ayin tav. For the ways of Yahuwah are straight. That's the word Yod Shin Resh. Straight. Like, remember the plumb line and the whiskey stick, the water level? The righteous will walk in them, and sinners will stumble over them. That's the end of the book of Hosea. Go back to what he said. Certainly, the one who returns toward Yahweh, then he will... This is Kaf Yod, He Vav Aleph, Ki Hu. Then he will, or remember, Kaf Yod means when, while, although, in which case, at which time. So in this case, it's translated just as. So just as he, then the word teref, tet resh pei, just as he tore them apart like a wild lion, ripping the prey and making it unfit, he will heal. That's Rapha, resh pei aleph. Yahweh Rapha, Yahweh Rafenu, Yahweh our healer. That's a promise from the covenant. Then here's this word Yod Kaf. That's the opposite of Kaf Yod. Well, the word, you can't find this word in the dictionary. But the word Mem Kaf is Makkah, which means to just strike with the hand. So here you have to be able to read the words and realize that you take the Yod prefix and put a mem or a hey or a tav or a bet. You do different things to find out how to read these words. So by understanding a little bit about the syntax, the grammatical structure of the Hebrew language, which is not that hard to do, just so you know, it's not that hard. And then it says, and he will het pei shin. That's set at liberty. We already did that verse. That was Hosea 6:1-3. This is the verse we're going to do. Here, excuse me. Well, that's still pertinent. Anyway, the point is, kuf het means the word take hold. So this is kuf het vav amcha. Take hold with you words. That's debarim. We're talking about how to take words. Take words with you and shuv. Return. Repent. Go back to Shabbat. Toward Yahweh and say to him, here's the script. This is what you say. Call Tasha. That's why we have the She train, because the word is spelled Shin Aleph. That's She. Shin Vav Aleph is falsehood, worthless, nothingness. It's also helation, which is be so light. So remember, every word has its opposite. So this goes back to the commandment where it says, do not lift up, that's Nun Shin Aleph, do not lift up his name, that's his Shem, which is all these things. It is a matter of his Shem, his name, fame, renown, reputation, unto vanity. This is the word for vanity. Do not regard these things and say, whatever, I don't care, I don't have time, it doesn't matter to me. You can say that, but the other half of that sentence, that verse says, for Yahweh will not hold him guiltless who lifts up his name or takes his name unto worthlessness. So this word she, the reason why we have the engine locomotive she here, because Ephraim she, the man who invented the train, the words Ephraim she is to say this is what Ephraim, the lost 10 tribes, have done, which is why they became the lost 10 tribes. They took up the great matters of the Torah, considered them alien, strange, something they knew nothing about, whatever, I don't know, and they then got themselves turned exactly into their attitude that they projected towards Yahuwah and became Shin Aleph Hey, din, crash into ruins, laid waste, such that the nations of the world would, this is also what Shin Aleph Hey, She, means, to wonder, be astonished, amazed, to stand empty of thoughts and gaze in wonder. So for someone who has never seen in the days of the Industrial Revolution such a tremendous piece of equipment like this railroad locomotive, wow, look at that piece of engine. Wow, the work it can produce, the things it can do, the places it can go. Astounding. Wow. So people that they used to say that about Ephraim, like we just read a few minutes ago, that Ephraim, when he spoke, everybody stopped to listen. But what happened since then is that Ephraim has become such a darn fool that everybody looked and said, why would somebody so incredible like this tribe of Ephraim, the northern 10 tribes, throw it all away? Why would they throw it all away? Don't they even have a clue to know what they have in their hands that Yahweh gave them? Gosh. Shin Aleph Nun. I'm just looking at derivatives of the word. Shin Aleph Nun Yod. Different. What made the Shea train different? Narrower gauge, and they put a gear drive in the wheels that they didn't have in the other locomotives. Shin Aleph Nun. Make a noise. Uproar. It's like Yom Teruah. Regard Yom Teruah. Make a noise. Blast the trumpet. Yell and shout. Sing. Praise Yah. Shin Aleph Nun also means be at ease. Rest securely. Live in tranquility. So that the two sides of the coin is that it means both to be in this uproar and to be very tranquil. I'm just trying to show you examples of what I've said in the past where each word has this dynamic, the two sides. And if you see the way the locomotive works with the steam and the compression and driving the wheels and letting enough steam out to push this piston back and forth, Shin Aleph Pei, shaf, to gasp, pant after, to long for. Hence the word chef. This inn at Knowles Hill, Rhonda's this incredible chef, enough to make you gasp and pant and long for. Noon Shin Aleph Pei, breathy, inhaled. Shin Aleph Yod Pei Hey, longing, striving, aspiration, ideal, ambitious. I'm bringing all these words out because when he says all emptiness, all Tav Shin Aleph, there's a variation of the word. If you look in the dictionary, Tav Shin, there it doesn't even have the Aleph, you can't find this word in the dictionary, means weak. Tav Shin Shin means feeble. So Ephraim is basically told, here's the script Ephraim was to say to Yahweh. He says, here it is, Hosea 14, when you, similar to Deuteronomy 30, when all these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse, and you see world history laid out as this continuum, just like you look at this from the beginning of Genesis all the way out to here we are at 2020, and you say, gosh, look at that track, look at the way. It all happened just like he said. Then say these words. It was all tashay. It was all ambitious striving for empty, worthless nothing. Own, ayin vav nun, iniquity, guilt. Vechoch tov, and then take hold of good. There's the solution. All that lying, killing, and stealing that Ephraim has done for all these years, the lost 10 tribes, and you look at the history of the Western Hemisphere in particular, the Vikings, Germany, England, France, Spain, America, Central and South America, the Incas, the Aztecs, the Maya, we're all guilty, every one of us. Just stop and put that aspiration, the ambitious ideal towards Tov, good. And then this word Nun Shin Lamed Mem He, Na Shlamha. Well, Shalom means peace and fullness and complete. But when you put the Nun in front of it, it's Nun Shin Lamed, means fallen fruit, ejected. So it's translated substitute bowls for lips. But the next word, Peresh Yod Mem, Parim, Peresh Vav Peru, is fruit and productivity. Like you have a bull market, that's the stock market going like crazy. So you could say the fruit has fallen from our productivity. Or you could say substitute peace for bulls, for sacrifices. Be at peace with one another, doing chesed, tender loving kindness. Be merciful, do goodness, tov. And then this word for our lips, shin pei tav, yod nun vav. Shin pei tav comes from the word shin pei he, which means make slanting, put over the fire to refine it. Like the shay could go up a steeper hill. Compensated, indemnified, swept bare, smooth, planed, deburred of rough, like when you take a rough cut 2x4 and you put it through a mill and it's planed smooth. It means established, ordained, and armchair. In other words, does it just mean smooth like lips? He says, do good as you were established and ordained. Because Israel is the heritage of Yahweh, because Israel is Yahweh's expression of Kohanim and Melachim, kings and priests on the face of the earth, then Israel was created and established and actually, you might say, as it were, born as the son of Yah in order to do goodness on the face of the earth. So it's not just, well, I'm not going to be a king or a priest. If you want to even be his people, grafted in to the root, that olive tree of Israel. The interesting thing about the olive tree, apparently you can cut that thing down to the ground and it can lay dormant for 1,000 years. Dead, not just dormant, but dead, and the olive tree will actually sprout back to life again. And it can sprout back to life. The fine little threads, the tendrils of its roots, can be a mile away and sprout, and it'll be the same tree from here, and you'll never have even guessed. But that's the way the olive tree is designed. And when Yahuwah tells us that Israel is a parable, a metaphor of the olive tree, that's what he's referring to. The last verse that's here, tell him, hey, listen, we're sorry for looking to Assyria and Egypt. Assyria will not save us. Upon horses we will not ride. That word nun resh kaf bet na rakav is where you get the word Merkabah, which is tank. The Merkabah is the Israeli tank. It's a compound of horse and rider, or a charioteer in the chariot with the horses. It's military industry. Do not say ever again, that's the word Ayin Vav Dalet, ever again, our Elohim, our power, to the works, the product of our hands, our own hands. Do not say it's because of the American workmen, or it's because of our great military, our great industrial, our great medical, it's our great nothing. It's because in you, that's in Yahweh, an orphan finds mercy. That word racham is the word for womb, W-O-M-B, and where you get the word for woman, it's in the womb, where it's supposed to be the safest place on earth. And America has not only committed more abortions, but also spread the abortion industry across the face of the earth worse than any other people. And we have incurred such horrendous, heinous guilt upon ourselves. If we stop right now and start doing tov and chesed to one another, this thing can change, but it's up to you. It's up to me. And then the last word here, that word for orphan, yod tav vav mem. Well, the word tav mem means perfect. And so another way to read this word is not just orphan, but perfect he will be. Yahweh said to Abraham, be perfect, walk after me in perfection. The word Urim and Thummim is the two stones, or their quality attributes of the 12 stones that were on the ephod of the high priest. That word tom means artless, which means you don't make up your own stuff. If I'm making this stuff up, if this is my art and I'm trying to pass it off as Yahweh's word, shame on me, and the condemnation will be great. I'm well aware of this. As far as I know, to the most best of all my scholarship, of all my study, of all my intense taking every little detail into account. This is as pure a truth as I could possibly ever assess and determine. But don't take my word for it. Look at it for yourself, double check it with your friends and family, and pray, and may the Ruach HaKodesh lead you and guide you into the ways of truth.
Teshuvah.
That's the end of the word Hosea. And Teshuvah, to the Debir of Yah, the word of Yahweh. It's all about that. This is the solution to our problem. Present tense.
Hallelujah, Eric. All right, brother. Well, we're going to be heading the ranch again tomorrow, so it's been a wild ride. Pretty good run here.
Any chance of one more video, or is this it? Listen, we were going to try to do something live and maybe have people call in, but that ain't going to happen because you got to run. But the question is, if anybody has a last request to do one more thing before we got to shut it down for tonight and the rest of the week until who knows when, send in something and put in a request. Otherwise, this is what you got.
All right, brother. Shalom.
Shalom.